Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both historically as well as in modern day times. As always, I'm your host, Rev.Hagen, and I'd like to start off the show the way we start off every show with thanking our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's Scream. Radio.com. The only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year live streaming horror station. Why, you ask? Because Halloween is not just a holiday. It's a way of life. Thank you very much. Now, today we're going to be looking at the phenomenon of giants pretty much historically. We're going to get into modern day time to a certain degree, but giants is the theme of the show today. Now, there's there's a couple of different ways to look at this. The Bible talks about giants, and we'll get into that. There's also supposed historical archaeological evidence for giants. And there's two different weird cover-ups that people talk about going on. One is the church to steal the bones of these supposed dug-up giants, and the other is the Smithsonian to steal the bones of these dug-up giants. And with the Smithsonian, it did not start off as stealing, but we'll get into that in a second. So giants is the topic of the day, and I'm not talking like Shaquille O'Neal, even though he's humongous. But actual races of people. And what's kind of wild, like a lot of the topics we talk about when we're talking about strange and unusual things in history, is that, like dragons, there's a legend of dragons in every culture on the planet. Giants, there's a legend of a giant race of beings in almost every culture on the planet. Now, why is that? If there isn't some kernel of truth here, why is it? Now, is it, some people will say, well, maybe there were just, genetically, there's pygmies today, right? There's dwarves or little people. I know people don't like the word midget, but smaller humans today. There's larger humans today, like the basketball players and some of these humongously tall guys. So isn't it possible that there was a race of people that were ginormous, right? That were literally giants. Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today. I am going to go ahead and start off biblically in the Bible, and I'm going to make sure I get my notes on this, because believe it or not, and maybe you do believe it, maybe I'm just delusional. And for those of you watching and not listening, the light's going to go in and out because I'm using natural light today. So if you're watching, I do apologize for that. If you're listening, well, you could obviously care less. So let's get back into it. I have been accused of slamming Christianity on my show here. That's never been my intention at all. I actually know some really, really rockin' cool, not just Christians, but Jesuit priests and other ministers of other faiths. As a minister myself, as a reverend, as a priest of Wicca, I've talked to and run into various people of various faiths, but it's interesting to me that some people have perceived on this show that I have been thumping Christians, and that's the last thing that I want to give the impression of. I give Christians a hard time because, well, they're Christians. I'm kidding. Okay, so here we go. So let's get into it. Giants. Okay, we're going to start off basically with a biblical perspective here, okay? So, according to the Bible, just before Noah happened, in the Bible, in Genesis, the certain group of angels come down, all right, see the women of men, and think they're absolutely gorgeous, think they're robo babes, for the parlance of our time, well, my time anyway. And decide to have sex with them because they're so hot. They just can't resist it, right? And from this union is born this race of giants that's mentioned, that there's 36 tribes. I think I've mentioned this already, of giants in the Bible. There's 22 individual giants that are mentioned in the Bible. And this guy, Steve Quayle, wrote this book called True Legends, all right? And I hope he doesn't sue me over this. I'm actually just giving the idea of what he thinks. I'm not actually using any quotes or anything like that. But his basic gig is this, is that that there's a huge government... I'll read this real quick, some notes that I wrote on this. He believes that there's a huge cover-up in regards to giants. They don't want people to know that the angels, the Nephilim, had sex with human women, and that's what created these giants, the Rephilim. He also believes that the U.S. military has a blood test to test specifically for the giant gene, and that the underground bases, and we've touched on this in a couple other shows, underground bases, right, are not for aliens at all. They're for testing of these giants and to build a new race of giants, right? Wow. So his whole gig is that because you get blood drawn when I was in the Army, you get blood drawn all the time, right? And they test you for AIDS, thank God. Every 6 months, I think it is, you get another test for AIDS. If you got to go overseas, you get a blood test and a gazillion shots. He's saying that all this DNA that they take from us, for one thing, is tracking us. If you read some of this guy's books, he's a little... what's funny is I call this guy kooky because he doesn't have my ideas, which is very human of me and probably very wrong, and yet I do it. To me, this does sound very far-fetched. But is it very far-fetched that the government is going to test for the giant gene, right? And if you've got this latent gene, you don't have to be tall to have it. It could be, like I said, a latent gene. They want to either extract that or enhance that in you and create this race of giants, right? That are going to, take over the world or be the ultimate fighting force. But because of that, and when we get into the archaeological stuff, there's been so many skeletons found in America, it's not even funny. Supposedly giant skeletons in America. And at one point, if you're enjoying our show visually on YouTube, I'll be throwing up pictures. If you're on the radio, listening to us on SCRMradio, look this up. You can look up archaeological giant digs, and you'll get 1,000 hits with a gazillion different digs. Some of them are so obviously photoshopped, it's painful to watch. Others you go, well, I don't know about that. But we'll get into that in a bit. So that's his deal. Everything from David and Goliath. That Goliath was a giant, a literal giant who is mentioned in the Bible. I'm not going to get into every single name that is associated biblically with giants, because that will be the entire show, and that's not the whole show. So in a nutshell, this guy's looking for super soldiers, right? He believes they are also capable of smelling, giants are capable of smelling specific genetic markers, right? Like in the nursery rhyme, fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, right? He calls this the harmonics of blood. That, and who knows? Maybe this guy's onto something, right? I don't know. That even going after specific families through this practice, the giants will target, or back in the day, and according to him, even today, specific family lines. That genetic marker we were talking about that the military is looking at, well, apparently the giants can sense the same thing, can sense their own. And he also believes that we're living in the flood times. We're living in the time of the next great flood. I don't know. That I don't buy. But that's just me. If you do believe that, go with it, man. Sing it on the mountain. Jeez, what do I know? I'm just some schmo with a YouTube channel, radio show. He also believes the basis for most of his theories are in the Bible. All right? Now, if you move off of the Bible now, let's look at even Norse mythology, North cultures. In Norse, they're called the Jotuns, right? Jotuns are the ice giants from the Norse pantheon. They're from another realm. They live in Jotunheim. They were banished there by the Aesir, who refused them entry into their world, the Asgard. The Jotun can be seen throughout Norse mythology. They frequently interact with the Aesir as well as the Vanir. This is a little complicated for those of you who are not, I hate the term heathen, but that do not follow the old Norse myths, right? This kind of gets into a lot of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of the Norse path. Norse path. I'm having a hard time talking, so I'm going to have a drink of iced coffee. Bear with me. Thank you. Okay. They're usually in opposition to or in competition with the Vanir and the Aesir, but they also interact with them in non-hostile manners. Some Jotun even intermarry with the Aesir and the Vanir, and there are many named as parents or grandparents of the Aesir, such as Thor and Odin. It's a very complex relationship between these two comparable races. If you read the Poetic Edda or the Prose Edda, it really gets into this. Thor loves beating up Jotuns, but Jotuns are very, in my opinion, we're just totally getting off topic here. Lord, the Jotuns are very misunderstood. They're not the evil, in the Abrahamic religions. It seems that thought that there's got to be good and evil, right? Period. Something can't just be. It has to be good or bad. It's like, to me, it's like saying, well, great white sharks are evil. Are they evil, or are they just being sharks, man? You know what I mean? Yeah, they eat us. Well, we're swimming in their waters, right? That's their world. This is our world on the land. But then we go into their world and we go, these evil bastards are eating us. They're swimming in their feeding grounds, brainiacs. There's legends of giants in China, in India. The giants of Kashmir, these huge guys in Kashmir, and I'm throwing up a picture on that too, because I found it fascinating. In North America, over 1,000 reports of skeletons, 7 foot to 15 feet tall. In mound cultures from California to New Hampshire, they've found these skeletons. Some in these amazing mounds back east, and some in some caves out here. The Hopi Indians talked about this race of giants that lived in this certain cave that had red hair and 2 rows of teeth, and that were plaguing their village. So what they did is, according to the Hopi, what they did is that they burned them out. They started a fire, and because the giants were that much of a problem for these guys, and they burned them out. And again, whether it's this topic or any other topic, having a half an hour platform, there's no way I can get all this, give you all the information on giants. I just can't. There's just not enough time, and there are scads and scads of information here for you guys. So if you dig the topic, please watch the whole show. Don't bail on me now, okay? But do some research. If this is interesting, any of the shows, but this one in particular, since this is the one we're watching, if it's interesting to you at all, do some research, my brothers and sisters. Expand your mind, broaden your horizons. California and New Hampshire in the desert. So they burned these redhead giants out. The Hopi Indians did. And we have found the cave, and we have found supposed skeletons of these giants, right? So what happens is they call the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian comes out, takes a look, supposedly, takes the bones, and they're never seen again. This has happened over and over with the skeletons of giants that are found in North America, supposedly. Almost every single story you hear about giants being dug up, the Smithsonian is contacted, they take the remains, and they're never heard from again. There's documentation to back that up. The theory is it doesn't fit into the history that we've recorded, and that the science that the Smithsonian backs up with their displays. And if you've never been to the Smithsonian Institute, there's 5 in D.C. When I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, I went to a couple, saw an amazing Viking exhibit, an amazing, saw the Hope Diamond was out there at the time, unbelievably cool. So, I mean, they're not this big evil organization. It could be said that even if this is true, if they're hoarding these skeletons, that they're just protecting what's theirs. That's the theory. Wish they wouldn't if it's the case. I actually do believe that is the case. And I used to subscribe to the Smithsonian membership. I had a membership, and I got the magazine and the whole deal. I love the Smithsonian, but I do not put it past them to do something like this. Describe cross-culture, legend, folklore, and local history and nursery rhymes. We've got tons of them. There's even a report of giants on the moon. Hello. When Google released a mapping software of the moon, folks were shocked to find what looked like an alien walking across the surface and casting a long shadow. After analysis, it turned out the alien would have to be over 150 feet tall. That's 150 feet tall. The figure bearing a striking resemblance to ancient Greek Colossus of the Rhodes. Now, I haven't told any stories of China. I did throw up a picture of the giants of Kashmir, if you're watching this instead of listening to this. But when you look at Europe, it's insanity. Here's one in the 11th century in Glastonbury, right? They found a bunch of giants. In the year 1190, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey in England announced an incredible discovery. According to the historical record, the monks began to experience dreams and visions about King Arthur. King Arthur. Around that time, which prompted them to consult King Henry II. Henry informed them of a long-kept secret of the royal family. Arthur's remains were buried in the churchyard of St. Dunstan in Glastonbury. A search was soon commissioned. Upon excavating the indicated area, the searchers unearthed a massive oak trunk buried 16 feet, just deep enough as Henry had described. Inside was a human skeleton, which confirmed that they discovered something special. Okay, it was absolutely gigantic. It appeared to be much taller than the average man, and the space between the eye sockets was as wide as the palm of a man's hand. Apparently, the famous king was truly larger than life. In the oldest depiction of Merlin. Literally, the oldest depiction of Merlin is I believe it's a tapestry. It's got to be older than that. Of him constructing Stonehenge. It's the first mention of Stonehenge as well, with the help of two giants. Dun, dun, dun. They also, in this abbey, they were digging and came across a strange cross mentioning King Arthur. Let's see here. Stonehenge in Ireland. They found a 12-foot, 2-inch high giant. The girth of his chest was 6 feet wide. The length of his arms was 4 feet. There were 6 toes on the right foot. The skeleton was on display and in exhibitions in Dublin, Liverpool, and Manchester, what later happened to the giant and its owner is unknown. That happens a lot in these stories. The other fascinating thing about these stories is they're found with perfect teeth. Giant teeth, but they're perfect. They're teeth. And often more than one row of teeth, which is absolutely wild. Okay, so in Scotland, northwest Scotland, popular tales of West Highland, orally collected by John Francis Campbell in 1893. They found this huge chamber, in the Iron Age, that was at least 2,000 years old. Bones were found to be quite fresh and in an extraordinary size. No person ever saw anything to compare with them before, and it's part of my reading here, and it is said no person could at all credit or even imagine the size of them with those who saw them, these bones. This was in Scotland. In Ireland again. In a prehistoric burial chamber dating back 2000 BC, So that's over 4,000 years ago. They found human skeletons which tower head and shoulders over modern man, stretched in the slab-top graves with offerings of food, ornaments, and ornaments beside them. Most are around 7 feet in height, an extraordinary width of shoulders, and massive bone construction. Madness. Now here's a really weird one. They found all these giant hammers, and I mean like giant hammers. There's an ancient Great Orme copper mine near the coastal town of something in North Wales. For me, it's, with my dyslexia, completely unpronounceable. But it's in North Wales. That's really all you need to know. This area rises 220 meters above the Irish Sea and is known as the location of the Giant Orme copper mine. It dates to the Bronze Age, about 3,500 years ago. More than 2,500 hammers at the mine have been recovered, many of them much larger than any human could wield. I'm going to throw a picture up here again for you guys on YouTube. But these things are huge, and 60 pounds. 60-pound hammers. Very googly moogly. So that's in Wales. The Keswick skull and thigh bone from a 20-foot and 10-foot giants were found entirely on the sea. Tuesday in England, in Cumberland, no less. To get back to the hammers for a second, and I know I'm all over the place on this, and I do apologize for that, but somebody to wield the hammers, the hammers that they found, 2,500 of them, mind you, at this ancient copper mine, someone would have had to be 12 to 18 feet tall to effectively wield these hammers. Hello! That's insanity. Hand axes with incredible size have also been found in England. In Sicily, they found these guys. Humongous. That were anywhere from 10 to 12 feet tall in Sicily. In ancient Rome, in Italy, some of the skeleton indicated men that were 7 feet tall and of an African race. There's a twist. Good night. They've been found in France under 4-ton monolithic slabs. And the interesting thing about the French one is when they came across these slabs, okay, and they moved these slabs, all of a sudden there was huge atmospheric atmospheric problems. So basically it went from a clear day to thunderheads rolling in and thunder and lightning happening. And under these slabs, giants. Absolutely unbelievable. In Greenland, a tribe of giants were revered and huge skeletons were found. In Turkey, the Hittite princess and princes and princesses were over 7 feet tall. Another site was found in Turkey with giants over 14 feet tall, supposedly. These remains. I'm going to throw up a picture of the different skeletons and their different sizes, respectively. Right? They've been found in Russia. They've been found in Egypt. What's really interesting is the only credible, what they call credible in the archaeological world, right? And it's one of these castaways, right? Castaway finds. Doesn't make sense, so we're not really going to pay attention to it. It's like the hammers that people find in stratas 1 million years old, or the screws, right? That are in these chunks of coal that the area that they're looking at, that dirt has not been disturbed for over 2 million years, yet here's a machine screw in that. Whole nother show again. But in Egypt, they found this finger, this mummified finger, that was so big, and this is a documented case, right? This finger, the finger was so large that the person who had this finger had to be at least 16 feet tall. So there's a sliver of proof right there for you. Either that, or somebody had giganticus of one finger. Which, come on, who's the weirdo now? Who's talking crazy now, right? We already talked about Genesis in Germany. They were all over Germany, throughout Europe. There were over 100,000 mounds found in North America, in the area where the giants were found. Now, there weren't giant skeletons found in every one of these mounds, but over 100,000 mounds have been found of an ancient race that lived in the Americas, and some of these supposedly had giant skeletons in them when they were unearthed around the early 19th century and after, and a little bit before too, when the Smithsonian was a boot, and they, pardon my Canadian boot, but I can't help myself sometimes, and I'm not Canadian, I never have been. That's the weird thing. When they've been given to the Smithsonian, they've disappeared. There were even giant bones found in a cave in Catalina Island, right here off the coast of Southern California. So that's kind of where we're at with the giants. Like I said, I'm throwing up some maps now. You can see how prolific they were, not just in Europe, but in North America as well. It's said that these guys weren't just super strong, being that humongous. It looked like they were pretty strong, especially if they could wield those over 60-pound hammers the way they did. Some of them were war hammers, some of them were mining hammers. But they're also said to be super smart. But again, this is from the guy at the beginning of our little soiree here into giants, Stephen Quayle. I don't think it's any relation to ex-Vice President Dan Quayle, but you never know. The theory is the brain is so big, they're going to be smarter, right? Come on. But that's the theory. And they have denser bones than the average bear, than the average man, you and I. Even though I think you and I are probably above average. But, you know, maybe not in bone density, and definitely not in height. I'm average 6 foot tall. In fact, I'm exactly 6 feet tall, and I had a stepfather who used to say, I'm exactly 6 feet tall. It was just me and Jesus. That was it. And he said it tongue-in-cheek, but I think he truly did believe that. So just like with everything else, there are so many weird and amazing things that are on this earth, as far as I'm concerned. The giants, everything that we've talked about so far is so wild. And I know we call it paranormal, and I even call this show Look at Paranormal History, right? But is it paranormal, or is it just plain history? I've talked about this a couple of times, but since this stuff has happened time and time again, stories of werewolves, stories of Bigfoot. We're going to do a show on the Jersey Devil. We're also going to do a show on dragons. These things that crop up all over the place, but somehow they don't fit in with our societal view of what the world should be. So we ignore them. That's just my opinion. Not everybody obviously shares that opinion. SCRMradio's got a lot of exciting things that are happening down the road. Please go and check them out. It's SCRMradio.com. That's Scream. Radio.com. If you love creepypastas, if you love horror stories, there's also some great interviews with some of the people that directors, but also people that bring you these creepypastas. Also some music, some fantastic music on the station. I've also started a Patreon page to try to do this full time. What I'd like to do with this channel is continue in this format for sure. But what I really want to do is travel around. Go to some of these spots. Go to some of these mounds we talked about today. Go to America's Stonehenge, and there is one. Go to the Serpent Mound. Go to Sedona. Look at the crazy new agey people. I'm one of them. I'll go look at myself. Go look at these people. It's supposed to be energy vortexes, UFOs, underground bases. Woohoo! Go to where they filmed the Patterson film, right? The most famous film, I almost said video, but film of Bigfoot ever known. People in China know about this video, for God's sakes. Go to some of these places with a camera, tell the story, and get some of the locals involved. It's a dream of mine. So I have this Patreon page to support this channel. If you want to become a patron, please check it out in the link below. It's the first thing you see is the Patreon link there. Support us if you can. This is so I can get some decent cameras. I know these sets are elaborate and phenomenal, but I'd like to get some better lighting. Just make this a show. Ultimately, what I'd like to do as well is, if you like the Art Bell show, that's what I'm going for a coast-to-coast kind of feel. You know what I mean? Where people can call in and say, hey, this is what happened to me. Along those lines, if you've got a story you want me to tell, or if you've got a story of your own about giants, about anything we've covered so far, leave it in the notes, or you can email it to me at rev.hagen, rev.hagen at gmail.com. rev.hagen@gmail.com. So that's our little show. Really hope you enjoyed it. This one was a little scattered, I know, because I'm feeling a little scattered today. What can I tell you? I don't know if it's the hurricanes or the nuclear annihilation we're facing from North Korea, but I'm a little discombobulated today. Be careful out there, my brothers and sisters, and as always, keep those heads up. Until next time, be safe out there.